Yeah, you wanna put that dish in your mouth.
Wish you could slide into my mind and make me mine. Push play rewind. Let's whip outside, and so am I.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dylan B. Dickerson White. I'm Mr. Trans USA 2022, and we're here tonight to our registration slashing. I think I've had four names for it right now. Interview with our Mr. Trans New Mexico, Trey Michaels, and I'm just going to have him talk a little bit about himself, introduce himself, some things that you may not have seen in the bio we posted. So, take it away, Trey.
Hi, thanks.
Okay.
So like you were saying, I'm Trey. Outside of drag, though, I go by Tommy. I use he, him pronouns. I live here in New Mexico in Albuquerque. It's beautiful. I've been here for 10 years now. What else that was not in my bio? A little bit on my bio was I do work in HIV prevention and queer sex education. So my focus is really focused on the queer community and providing safe sex education for them that they may not have gotten in school.
That's actually a really great way to start the conversation. And, people don't know that we were talking about this beforehand. It's a little secret, but the magic of recorded interviews. But yeah, before we get into any of the pageant things, and I think it's something important to talk about for us just because in the community, a lot of people may not know the risks that face trans folks specifically when it comes to sexual health and a lot of the education that cis people don't even get, when it comes to that. So it's something that I just kind of want you to speak on, kind of the importance of testing for trans folks in general and how you have been helping to like further that and get that, more accessible to people.
Yeah. So I think one, it's super important just to know what your status is. It doesn't matter what your status is on any STI, which is a sexually transmitted infection, as long as you know what your status is, right? So you can get treatment, take care of your community and your partners. I do work for Planned Parenthood, and part of Planned Parenthood is just your body, your choice. We meet you where you're at. So with my job is to teach safer sex, whatever that may look like. Sometimes it's condomless sex for people. They don't want to use condoms. So how else do we keep them safe? So a big part of my job is actually just to sit with people, and I ask a lot of personal, invasive questions about their sex life. But off of that, I'm able to give them the best treatment plan for them of how often they should get tested, what they should be getting tested for, what sites should be getting tested. With that, though, I'm also a PrEP navigator. So as our trans community, I really push for us to be on PrEP, which is a medication you can take to prevent HIV. So with that, I sit down with people. We call the doctor together. I help them get scheduled, and I help them follow up and stuff too, and I answer any questions they may have with their PrEP.
That's amazing because I have, especially in the last part about trans people and trans men in particular with PrEP. I mean, there were a lot of studies that were happening, that they weren't even including us in the very beginning, so it was very hard to know what was going to happen. But I'm not actually sure of this, and I was wondering if you knew what are some of the differences or things people need to know for trans men specifically, or AFAB people being on PrEP.
So there are two types of medication when it comes to PrEP. There's Truvada and then there's Descovy. Truvada is basically the main PrEP pill that everyone gets put on first, and that one's been approved for everyone. So it doesn't matter what you were assigned at birth, everyone can take that one. That particular one, though, Truvada, it's just really hard on the system. For me personally, I'm actually allergic to it. So I get migraines, I throw up, it's terrible. The second medication is Descovy. When they did Descovy, I like to tell people it's like Truvada put through a Brita filter. It's the same medication, just not as harsh. But they didn't do any studies for people assigned female at birth, which I thought was just crazy in general because cis women, trans people with vaginas have HIV. So it kind of comes down to a lot of doctors now they're being a little bit more open to open up stuff. So for me personally, I'm actually on Descovy because I've had a full hysterectomy. I don't have any of those reproductive organs anymore. So my doctors were a little bit more comfortable giving me Descovy. At first they were kind of like, I don't know, it hasn't been approved. And And I just kind of told him, well, we can try it and see if I don't get HIV, or we don't try it and I might get HIV. So
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt to try. At least we'll know. So it kind of sucks a little bit that as a trans person, we kind of have to do this exploring and advocating for ourselves to get medication, because if I can't take Descovy, I can't take PrEP. And which is scary, because how do I keep myself safe from HIV when
Yeah.
everyone's pushing for PrEP?
And it's something that, it's a lot of people have really started to know, but that gap in research and gap in knowing what's going to happen is really, I think we've seen that, because there are some areas in the community where rates are rising. And I don't know specifically the numbers right now, but I've seen that happen. And it's something that, I think that you're also probably, as an educator, and Planned Parenthood in general, doing the work they do, it's pretty important, because I'm sure we can all speak to being trans folks who have gone to doctors and just don't have the knowledge that even we have going in.
Oh yeah, it's especially when it comes to PrEP and stuff. Thankfully, I go to a trans clinic, so everyone there's like super trans healthcare focused. But when it comes to other doctors and stuff, especially going to like specialists trying to explain, it's
like before you can even get to the reason why you're there, you got to do the whole trans health 101 thing.
Let me tell you why I'm on all the medications I'm on. That has nothing to do with why I'm here for a haircut. Like,
right. The what's it called? The trans broken arm thing. Is that what the phrase it was called? Yeah. Or, it's just kind of crazy. So I was wondering if did you do were you involved in any of the work to do some education for outside providers, or does Planned Parenthood have something program like that?
Yeah, so actually, I'm part of Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Hood Mountains. So we recently, I'm sure folks have over the years heard how Planned Parenthood offers hormone replacement therapy, HRT. It's only certain Planned Parenthoods throughout the nation. So we recently, for the Rocky Hood Mountains, just did our gender affirming care program. We've been working on it for the past couple of years now. And basically, all of us trans folks here at Planned Parenthood came together. We came up with an entire trans 101, how to treat patients. And we've trained every single staff member with Planned Parenthood, from our health center staff all the way up to our accounting and CEO, have been trained by myself or one of my coworkers on just how to treat trans patients. Outside of that, I get a lot of requests from UNM, which is the University of New Mexico. They have a huge medical program here. And at least about 2 to 3 times a year, I actually go over and I'll speak to new upcoming doctors. So people who are just getting into medical school, and just really talking about my experiences, stuff I've gone through as a trans man, being discriminated against in the healthcare system and all that stuff, just so that way they can kind of get an idea of what we go through. And usually from there, they just end up following up with more trainings or more questions afterwards.
That's what I figured. I thought I had read that. I just wanted to kind of get into that, just because it's such an important thing to know, because as I'm sure from personal experience too, that we both know, the community, going to a doctor can be one of those things. It's a traumatic experience because of all of these things, because people don't know. And it's just the whole experience can turn people off from getting the care they need. And that can explain so many of the gaps we have. And just, I think that you're doing that amazing work. And it's just something that I think that, it's something continuing on and seeing in New Mexico would be amazing. And you kind of hit on something that I wanted to get into.
Mm-hmm.
Terminology, you've said a couple of HRT and the abbreviations, and I think that's something that there's a few that I was thinking of in my own mind, that some terms have changed over the years. We used to call it sex change, for example.
Yep.
And even gender reassignment, not exactly things that we say anymore. So I think I wanted to ask, what's the importance, if you can explain to people, of using the correct terminology and why terminology evolves, really?
Terminology, it's super important just to be able to know what it is, keeping involved with it, even if you're not sure understanding why things have changed or something. It's just kind of I just tell people, it's just respecting that at some point someone had felt some type of way about something. So the biggest one is like STDs. We hear everyone talking about STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. Gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, those are not diseases. They're infections. I tell people it's like getting the cold, right? It's not a disease. You just have a cold. Even HIV, while it's a virus, it's not a disease. You can manage it. So that's why we've now switched it to infections. Also, that helps with the stigma of things. So when you're sitting there saying it's a disease, that's where you start hearing the
Right.
dirty and the clean.
Because people have that connotation that disease have. Not only is it something that people seems much more negative, it also seems much more permanent.
Yes.
Like, and that is something that I think that it makes a distinction there.
It does, because if you think about it, you hear an infections, take some antibiotics, it clears right up. But a disease, that just stays there. So it also plays out just into that stigma as well, where you hear people saying, oh, are you clean? Are you dirty? Yes, I showered. So
it's such a weird.
In my line of work, it's a lot of explaining to people, like, you don't want to ask someone if they're clean, right? People who have HIV, they're not dirty because they're positive. Like, so when you're using that terminology, that is hurtful. So it is real important that, especially when it comes to sexual health or just trans healthcare in general, being up to date on what those terms are. And if someone corrects you, just being open and being like, oh, I had no idea. Good to know. I'll work on that.
And it's exactly that. That's one of those huge things that, like, for allies especially, because even within the community, terms can change pretty fast. Not even all medical providers are going to be up to date. So I'm an editor, and we don't like to, for academic stuff, we don't even like to use the term elderly anymore, and there's a lot of reasons why. So not even doctors can really know that. So it's something that we have to understand that and being patient with it. But on the flip side, it brings me to kind of another question I was having. There's a lot of misconceptions and things that people just really don't understand about the trans community, or have these beliefs that are just, maybe they were what was accepted at the time, or maybe they're just completely inaccurate and always have been. So other than what we've been kind of discussing, what do you think is another one of those major ones that's important for people to get over?
I would have to say, just for at least for myself, as a trans man, some of the biggest stuff that I've experienced, and that I hear the younger trans men, as I like to put them, tell me, is they tend to run into people who are instantly, if you start your hormones, you start testosterone, you're gonna roar, you're just gonna be angry all the freaking time. You are gonna turn into this angry man and just Hulk all the time. When that's not always the case. In fact, I started my testosterone and I calmed down so much. So I just like to tell people that when it comes to at least hormones and stuff, it's not just doing it to be cool or anything, or to see if it is life-saving. From where I used to be, pre-transition, raging alcoholic, was not taking care of myself, to now, I barely drink, if anything. I have a career, I have my own house, so taking hormones, it is life-saving. It can actually make people productive members of society when they're just respected for who they are.
Yeah, and it's one of those huge things we talk about, and I did like the fact that we were focusing a lot on the healthcare side of it, because it's something that's super important right now, in the community, is politics, everything that's going on. And you kind of spoke a little bit on why HRT is life-saving, or gender-affirming procedures in general. And I think that that is definitely the huge misconception, is that it's elective, and that it's just not necessary. And it's something that maybe we can get a little more onto the personal side of that, not just for yourself, but how do you see? Because I'm sure that you have people coming in too, families in Planned Parenthood, with younger people starting. How do you see this play out for kids? You have that personal experience. I want to see, can you describe what it's like to see that young trans person begin this, and that shift that you see in that person?
Yeah. So, with my job, because I do work with Planned Parenthood, but I don't actually work in a health center. So I work in the HIV department. We're the only Planned Parenthood in the nation with an HIV department. So my job, as I tell people, I get paid to be gay. I get to hang out with queer people all day, every day. So right now, actually, I'm at work, and today was our youth programming today. So we have a youth program for LGBT youth from the ages of 13 to 19. 19 is like that weird age they can kind of go back and forth between our adult and our youth group. But with our youth, our focus basically is we're just here for them, right? Every single one of my kiddos in this group is trans. So a lot of them we've been able to watch for the past couple of years where they came out as trans, right? I have one little trans mask kiddo here. Started out, I'm a trans man, and has stuck with that, and just watching them grow. Because when they first came here, it was, whew, but now he has calmed down. He finally actually gets to start hormones this year, and again, just to see like that relief and happiness in his face. It does. I love my job. I get to be here and I get to have all these kids ask me every question in the book. Well, what does this surgery look like? What does bottom surgery look like? And it's just being able to give them my experience and actually being able to do the research with them. I learn a lot from these kids, probably more than I've learned online.
Yeah, I don't think people, a lot of the kids too, realize that that's pretty much where we had to find information. YouTube videos, at least when I started, was pretty much all there was of people describing their own experience.
Yep.
And so I just maybe kind of wanted to ask, if you had this kind of resource when you were starting, do you think your experience would have been different?
I don't know, to be honest. Because these kids, I'm gonna say, I feel like I'm about to age myself. A lot of these kids' parents are my age or a little bit older. So from what I'm seeing is like my generation of parents tend to be super cool with their kids being queer, right, on the
Yeah.
queer spectrum. For me personally, my mom is like Westboro Baptist religious crazy. So growing up, I never would have been able to even come to this kind of place. But if I'd had something like this once I was on my own, right? Once I turned 18 and had moved out on my own, I think if I'd had something like this, yeah, it would have helped so much because thinking back, I knew I was trans from like 3. There's home videos of me walking around saying I'm a boy. So I think if I'd had something like this, I would have come out sooner as trans. But at the same time, I appreciate what I call my lesbian years before I started my transition because I feel like that made me a better man today because of it.
And I love there were some fun questions and stuff that we can get to and everything, but just the fact that you talked about those years and the experience that's kind of unique for trans people is being on both sides of excuse me, being at least perceived that way. So I kind of wanted to, obviously it's not a question on there, but it just popped in my head. People always talk about whether or not trans mask folks or people who are quote unquote cis passing trans mask folks have male privilege. And there's it's obviously a very loaded question. So what are your thoughts on that? Either way.
For me personally, I definitely do. I see the male privilege I've got now. I've been transitioning for 9 years this year. So like, I see it. When I applied for this job, got it. I got high pay, like everything you hear about with male privilege, I've been experiencing. But I will say for the longest time, I didn't recognize it because it was so weird for me in the very beginning. The thing I tend to run into the most now is because of how I look. It's an automatic, well, you are cis passing, you have that privilege. You have no idea how hard it is for the rest of us trans folks, right? And that's where I have to remind folks, I can go to the bathroom right now and I don't have to be worried, right? No one's going to bother me. But there was a time before my transition as a lesbian when I would have men follow me into the restroom and I'd have to prove myself as a woman that I was supposed to be in there. So it's a very different privilege, but I'm also having to take that time to realize my privilege is I don't have to worry about certain things, but my trans siblings do. So I need to use my privilege to keep them safe. So it's It's a weird spot, especially when you live as a girl for 25 years.
Yeah,
And
you
all of a
have
sudden you have this privilege. You're like, what do you do with this?
right. It feels weird, doesn't it? Sometimes you're like, I don't want this. Is awkward. I think the first time I noticed it, I was on the bus, going somewhere, and I was it was really tight trying to get past somebody like coming in this way, going that way, and it was just a woman who like had her head down. It was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. Like I'll like people moving out of my way when they wouldn't before. And it's like, I'm not asking you to move. It's very weird, you know? And that was the first little thing that really caught my attention. People see me differently. And it was very early. It was like a year in, where I,
I, I think mine was it was during COVID. There was some kids or something outside my house, like just full on fighting, like just going at it with each other. Um, and I went outside and I pulled one of my dad and just yelled, "Hey!" But it was deep, and they just, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir." I didn't, and it threw me off because I was like, this would have never happened a couple of years ago or pre-transition. Like these kids probably would have ended up coming over and beating me up. Like, so it's definitely recognizing that male privilege. I think it's more of not so much like the positive, it's more like the negative. I always get worried, like if I'm walking down the street and there's a girl in front of me, I'm like, oh, am I
yeah.
getting too close? Like I walk fast as it is. I promise I'm not
Yeah.
walking up on you. Like let me throw some gay in my like walk just so you're
Just so, yeah, you're consciously kind of trying to monitor the way other people see you because you don't want to be perceived as threatening. And
very
and
much
that's
that.
it's one of the things that got me was like smiling at somebody's kids because you think they're cute as a guy. People think that's really weird.
They do not appreciate that at all.
Like it's just okay. Well, so I have to just kind of like be mindful of that. But I mean, I think little kids are fun and cute, so it's hard.
I always just make sure I drive just a little. Oh, girl, your kid is cute.
Right.
Just so that
Again,
when they're like, oh, he's gay. Okay, it's just throw
yeah,
the wrist out.
yeah. Just do something. Yeah, which is not much of a stretch for me, depending on how many margaritas I've had. So.
Vodka tonics and well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm better than I used to do with that. So yeah, let's kind of like we could probably have like so many conversations about that whole issue because it's something that there's each specific topic, health in the community, the whole passing privilege, sort of like I said, on both sides, really.
Hmm.
Um, and it's something like every topic can be its whole lecture.
Yeah.
But we have such a good baseline, I think, to talk about right now. Some of the things that you've been doing and might want to continue, should you win the national titles. So you have a big platform already. You do a lot of education, and I'm just wondering. I know a lot of people in your state specifically know who you are, know the work you do. So how would you plan on kind of extending that to the national level, the platform and work you already do?
So personally, for me, if I were to win the national Mr. Trans, something I've always personally have felt just in any pageant system I've done, or have wanted to do, especially on a national level, is to bring our community kind of back to like HIV, prevention and focus. And I know a lot of people are like, it doesn't affect everyone, but our community was so impacted by that. We lost so many, we have a whole generation missing, where we don't know our history. We all, you see a lot of gay men who had to figure out how to be gay men. So for me personally, I think my biggest thing is anyone who would be registered or something, I want them to do some kind of not fundraising, but some kind of fundraising community work when it comes to HIV prevention and stuff. Actually get involved, get to know people who are positive, actually get to sit and talk with them. Um, some of all my prevention stuff, some of the stuff that really works comes from talking with people who are positive. Um, Looking at past other like national title holders, I believe it was Whitney Page.
Yeah.
Yeah, Whitney Page. She was a former goddess and all that stuff. When she was a goddess, every time she did a crowning number at any prelim, all her tip money, she donated it to the local like HIV fund or care or something in that city. So for me, I would want to kind of I want to carry that over
Yeah.
and push that for our community, because the more involved you get with HIV care, you see how much it ties into trans health care, which then ties into queer health care. It all comes together eventually.
like yeah, and you know, it's something you really hit on, and I kind of agree. I in my life personally, I know a lot of people that have been affected by that, and that's something that I think that people it's the way it ties into just trans healthcare in general, and not just healthcare, but the trans experience is that people always say, "Well, I don't. It doesn't affect me. I'm not trans." And I guarantee you know somebody who is, even if you don't
Hmm.
know that yet. Like, so being able to help and advocate on those issues, even if you just the awareness and just people knowing in general and not having those misconceptions is better for everyone.
Yeah, and my dad's the best example for that. There was a point a couple years back where I was in Texas, almost died from anaphylactic shock, and he saw what I went through in Texas, right? So after that, he's been a huge. He's the first one to call out people, especially his family and stuff, on like, you don't have to understand trans people or not. You don't have to understand what their healthcare is, but they deserve healthcare where they're respected. Like, so I think if our allies can just use your voice. That's all we need.
And it, that's the thing, you know. I always the allies like I am very understanding of the fact that you know we are a small group of people, but not really that small. Like about the same number have like people have like type 1 diabetes apparently, like
Hmm.
something you know something that's very close in numbers. And when you think about that you know scale of things, um, there's a lot of allies for you know that community even in that same level. So it's not something that's uncommon. And as we mentioned before when we were talking about it, it is a one of those things that because of the lack of sexual education, you know, the rates are not decreasing as they should for our community. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and especially it's just when it comes to everything, COVID really hit us. I know at least here in New Mexico, we saw everything rise, STI rates, HIV rates, everything, just because people weren't getting tested, but people were still hooking up. So that's where it got a little hard because they were just being told you shouldn't be hooking up. Well, they're still going to hook up. So how can we be safe? Like,
Yeah. And, you know, again, because my brain works this way, science background, I have to ask, um, do you know of anything that's like, how does having had COVID impact people with HIV differently? Has there been any information that you guys have gotten on that?
I haven't seen anything like official. I know some people with HIV who got COVID, it did hit them hard. But it all just kind of depends on each person's body. I have some friends who are HIV positive who got COVID and nothing. If anything, they get taken out more with like a sore throat. So it just kind of depends on each person's body. I know some people. I know one person who is positive and they got COVID and it just it took them out.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of different for everyone. I personally I got COVID and I was fine. My strep throat is what got me. Um, but then I have other friends who get it and it just.
It's completely. And you
Mhm.
know, it's one of those things too. It's that's probably something that's going to be researched. There's not enough time or information people have yet, but it's
Yeah,
another reason why it's important to like keep getting the data.
and I've always just been curious, like if the antivirals that these people who are positive on, if that has anything else to do with it, if that helps it not be as severe for them. So
I've actually seen
yeah,
a little bit of information on that there were some studies that kind of showed a little bit of a benefit of having antiretrovirals. But yeah,
well, and
again, we're kind of like
yeah, no, the COVID and HIV, they like the biggest thing was they found with the COVID vaccine. That's where we're hearing about this HIV vaccine, if you've ever heard about it.
mhm.
But it's based off the technology and how they made the COVID vaccine. So they're finding ways now to where they may be able to cure HIV, which is freaking awesome.
Imagine like how life changing in over the next several decades that would be.
Right?
But again, like getting into that topic that we're both pretty like passionate about, you know, and it's good though because I do agree with you. Like that is a huge thing that a platform that at the national level we really need right now, especially because of what you just mentioned. COVID really hit that segment of our community pretty hard, and just the lack of you know testing and everything. Just yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that you would have the platform to be able to do that, especially with the work you already do teaching doctors. Like being able to do that at different medical schools would probably be like a really cool kind of thing. And so you're in New Mexico, so it's kind of like where I was sort of eventually getting to. You know how my ADD brain kind of works, right? It's so we're jumping off each other and it works perfectly. So with everything, bills affecting healthcare, bills affecting schools, sports, everything around the country, and it's changing every day. So can you kind of speak to maybe a little bit of what's happening in New Mexico right now, either positive or negative on that?
So, New Mexico is actually the safest state in the nation for trans and queer individuals. Um, I have a friend, he works for Equality New Mexico. Back in February during our legislation session, um, basically they went in and they've been able to, on the federal level, how they would recognize, same-sex marriages, that all those protections and stuff that are kind of like up in the air.
Yeah.
Basically, New Mexico took all that and put it here. So basically, here in New Mexico, like if an insurance wants to, sell insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield wants to sell insurance here, they have to cover trans healthcare. We do have, don't get me wrong, we have people who are trying to, do the ban trans people in sports. We've had a couple of the schools here do that over the past couple of years, but we've been able to keep them in check. So yeah, when it comes to queer folks, I've always said I love New Mexico for my transition. We have a clinic here that's just solely dedicated to trans people. Like, if you're cis, you can't go in there, you can't get services there. They were one of the first states that basically they let you use whatever bathroom you identify. It doesn't matter what's on your ID. In the state, you can just use it as long and you're protected. So it's a positive thing here because, everyone's super safe. The scary thing about that, though, is because we are one of the poorer states in the nation, we are getting a lot of people moving over, though. So a lot of people from Texas, a lot of people from Florida, Oklahoma. We just have a lot of trans families who are now moving into New Mexico.
So the resources that you have to be able to provide for those people, not really having that much, probably.
Yeah, so here in Albuquerque, we have the Transgender Resource Center, which is my nonprofit that I'm bringing awareness for. I'm also going to be joining their board here. And basically their focus is helping trans individuals with whatever it might be. So medication, housing, a job, name changes, that kind of stuff. They worked really close with EQ&M. So here in New Mexico now, you can go get your name changed. You don't have to put in any kind of publications in any kind of newspapers anymore, that was the most expensive part. You can now basically just go to the courthouse, pay your filing fee, get your court date scheduled, and done. So New Mexico has actually done a lot of stuff to really keep queer people safe here. And it's just getting better. So with the people that we have who are fighting for us. So my hope is that other states kind of look in and see what we're doing.
Yeah, I would hope so, because there's only a few states even that have kind of right now fully codified those protections and everything. Like I'm thinking like a handful, honestly, that I can think of in my head.
I think it's like California,
like Minnesota, I would say, or
Minnesota
Michigan
was one of them. Minnesota was one of them. I know they made that a safe state. New Mexico, Arizona, I know they're going to try, but they have a Democratic governor now, so she's not going to sign anything. So we saw some drag bands try and pop up there, and she just
it's that's actually kind of an interesting segue, because we talked about it, and then there's some questions I had like kind of about twofold here. There's these other states that have these drag bans and other things that are not going well, like you mentioned, like places that obviously like Florida. I don't know if you've seen that map that Aaron in the morning has, where it's all the different colors, like from red to blue, and Florida's just blacked out. Like nobody go here, forget about it. Like,
don't go there.
Yeah. But I was gonna kind of ask, would you have any kind of message you'd want to say for people who can't get out of those states, can't get out of there, like families who are really being affected by this right now? I know it's a hard question to be able to address people, but
I think honestly, I would just have to, I pull from my own experience, right? I remember the fight for marriage equality, right? All the no hate campaigns, right? So I I feel like we've kind of been through this where we have to fight for ourselves. So I just be honest with them. I know it's scary. I'm scared. I'm in a safe state that's safe, and I'm still scared to death. Um, but there's there's a lot of people supporting us. And talk to those who are your ally and who are your support system, right? Um, get them to be loud about it, even if they don't know what to say, except someone I love is trans, and this isn't okay.
Yeah.
Um, and look for your local resources. If you can't find local resources, just Google. There's all kinds of resources online where you can find trans support groups, parents of trans individuals support groups. Um, I know here the Transgender Resource Center does a lot of online support groups too. So if someone needs something like that,
Yeah.
Reach out to them.
Absolutely. And one of those things that comes off of it, if there's nothing, and I remember the days, even stories I would hear about the support groups people start like in somebody's living room with a potluck,
Hmm.
people from the county coming over and really having to do that from the ground up, and that might be where we're back at again.
I tell people to really look back at when the AIDS pandemic started and everything. No, the government didn't take care of us. The hospitals didn't take care of us. It ended up being, the lesbians took care of the gay men who had HIV and stuff. And it was a lot of coming together. And they're not going to take care of us. How do we take care of ourselves, right? So I think we're going to end up seeing a lot of that with trans folks. I wouldn't be surprised if you see some weird kind of, here, let me send medications to you from this state so you can have your hormones and that. So
Yeah. And it's really like we had talked about. It comes full circle back to the beginning of our conversation of knowing your history,
mhm.
having people there. People are trying to erase that, to not be able to see how we overcame this before, stuff like this. So it's a huge thing that I think is going to happen. I really kind of appreciate that message of starting from the resources you have right there, because they, even if they're hard to find, they're going to be there.
And the
Because
more you support your resources, the more they can
exactly.
get more.
Exactly. And kind of, I have like two more kind of questions,
Hmm.
sort of related, because we were talking about the bills, and a lot of them are about, like I said, healthcare, sports bans, but then these drag bands, and I think that we all, even though this is not a drag pageant, but it's a pageant, and a lot of people in our community have done drag before, um, myself included, you included, of course, and we all kind of saw this play out. Like the target of this wasn't really drag. It was a way for them to have a stepping stone there.
Hmm.
And so I kind of, there's a connection here. I'm getting um, like the connection, goes both ways. It's not only to get to us, but I think that from my personal experience, drag was something that was my gateway, honestly, into realizing who I was. Was it like that for you?
Oh yeah, I remember the exact show. It was a bar called Friends in Phoenix, and I remember standing on stage. I don't know the song, but I just remember looking across because there was a mirror across from like the stage, and just seeing myself in the mirror looking like this. Right, I had the whole beard and everything, and I was like, that looks right. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but that's me. Um, and that was at least, oh gosh, that was 2 3 years before I even started my transition.
Yeah.
And it was this thing. I was dating someone at the time who was like, you're not trans, no, don't do drag,
Yeah.
it's making you crazy. Well, they were crazy.
Yeah, and
um
I'm pretty sure that's their whole like argument on that side too. Is that
mhm.
is that same thing? But it's one of those things that it's such a huge part of that experience. So many people I know, like you said, just you always remember that moment. Mine was, I remember the first time I put a binder on, um, and I put my shirt on and seeing what I looked like. And I remember the shirt I was wearing. I remember like exactly where I was standing. There's always that moment when it hits you.
I
Like,
remember my drag uncle, for those who are in the drag world, Gunnar Gatlin. um Yep, he was
yeah,
my drag uncle, and he showed me how to tape my chest back to where it looked like I was topless, and how to paint and everything. And I remember going to one of my first Phoenix Prides, taped and everything. Like looking back, that was dumb. I was dumb. I'm
Yeah, we
surprised I
don't
didn't
do
pass
that
out.
anymore. Like,
I don't recommend duct tape or gorilla tape to tape your tits back. Like
I will
there's
not. Full disclosure: nobody will be allowed to use duct tape. If you try to do that this year for swimsuit, I'll stop you and give you something different.
like get some K tape, get some trans tape, like.
Yes.
But yeah, no. So that's I just remember like those little things of just being like, oh my gosh, and I would tape. I used to tape before I had a binder, and the amount of skin.
Glue and burns and
WD 40. I smelled like WD 40 for years just getting all that stuff off. So
yeah. But it's those pivotal moments, and it's a nice way for us to kind of bridge, the gap with this pageant, letting us do it as ourselves. And it's not an opportunity that a lot of us saw growing up, and it's really the only thing like this in the world for us, really. Which is really cool, at least on our side, the
yeah,
Mr. side. And so it's amazing to see so many people kind of jump over into the other side of it, and especially because it being an advocacy based thing, it all kind of ties back in to the whole mission. And my question, last thing I wanted to ask is, it's a pageant. We all have the prep work. We all have the advocacy work. We know ultimately, like, everyone does want to win and they want to do work for the community. But is there something else I wanted to ask that you would like to take away from this personally in November? Not give back, but just take away for yourself.
yeah. Honestly, I went through a divorce last year with my partner of like 8 years. So my entire transition was with this person. So I've spent the last year really kind of finding who I am as a person, which includes an ADHD diagnosis, an autism diagnosis. Um, so for me personally with this pageant, I want to redefine myself. You know, years ago before my transition and everything, I felt so confident. Like public speaking was the easiest thing. I didn't stutter. I didn't have any of those issues because my confidence was so high. So for me, I really want to get back to Tommy, because Trey's great. Trey's confident. He's done all of that. But as Tommy, I want to be able to bring out this weird neurodivergent person and let everyone get to meet him. And then just to connect more with trans brothers. Like that is always something here I've always had a hard time with, is finding other trans men. There's been more recently, but for a long time it was just me. So I'm excited to be able to be like with other guys who get my experience.
That was honestly, one of the most amazing things. And we have a very similar kind of experience, with autism, ADHD, and just kind of not hiding behind the drag person anymore. And just the whole trying to put that out there. I mean, I've personally had the most amazing time rediscovering myself through this. But the absolute amazing part of being there, with not being like the only trans person in the competition or something, or one of the few, and just everybody having that same sort of like place to start from.
He only did so good because he looks more like a dude than I do.
Something like that. It's just so much of a different experience, and I think that you're absolutely gonna get, like, because you have that going into it. So I'm just really excited that that's what you're like approaching this with. Because it's the right reasons and the right attitude to have. So I think, we went a little bit over, but I've had a lot of fun, talking.
Same.
I have to, I've been getting up super early lately, but I guess I just want to, we'll be wrapping up pretty soon, but I wanted to ask if you had any final things you wanted to say to everybody before we said goodbye. No is also an answer, so don't worry.
If you haven't been tested recently for HIV or an STI, I recommend you go get a full panel.
Yep. I mean, and
it's better to know what your status. It doesn't matter what your status is, as long as you know.
You want to put that dish in your mouth?
Hey everyone, Mr. Trans New Mexico 2023 here, Trey C Michaels. My platform charity organization this year is going to be the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico. This resource center offers all kinds of help with healthcare, housing, finding jobs, financial care to transgender individuals here in New Mexico. Mexico. Over the past couple of months, with all the legislation that's being passed and stuff, we've seen an influx in New Mexico of trans individuals. So my hope is to highlight why resource centers like this are so important for our communities and why we need to support them. Again, I'm Mr. Trans New Mexico 2023, Trey C Michaels, and I can't wait to meet y'all in November.
You wanna put that dish in your mouth?